Microsoft workloads. But then 7 years ago when I got into cloud, I really started to get into the whole Linux open source world. Obviously Amazon back then, being around 10 years, was where I started. Then the Microsoft Azure matured and I jumped into that as well. So I am very cloud biased. A lot of what you'll hear up here will be talking about the cloud. There may be some of you in the audience, probably a lot of you, that might be like calling BS on what I talk about. Happy to have a heated discussion about that afterwards. There's a lot of opinions out there. And being Australian and St. Paddy's Day coming up on Friday, happy for you to buy me a beer if you want to discuss later as well. So I'm not going to sell you on any of the solutions. Obviously, I'm cloud biased, but I'm not going to sell you either way. I'm going to try to give an even point of view about things, but more a Mike Moore documentary style where you can tell I'm biased towards something, but I'm trying to be balanced at the same time. Try to debunk any of the myths that I hear a lot of the time when people just, I mean, it's sort of a balance. There's probably a lot of you that have had your CIO or managers say we're going cloud, and there's no logic or reason behind it. They were just at a conference and they just got told cloud is where everybody's going, you should jump onto that. And so there's a backlash. There's people saying all these things, the cloud is Hotel California, you can't get out. There's all these like negative reactions because you're getting forced into it without any logic behind it. So I'll demystify a lot of that. It is interesting though, in the last 2 years, a lot of that has disappeared a lot. We've got major hardware vendors now tying into the cloud, which I think also means that, I mean, startups have been in the cloud space looking after those gaps and areas in security that the big vendors were ignoring for a long time, but now we've got the big security vendors and others jumping in there and taking it seriously. So I think more so in security, because security is something that works the same. They probably make the same profit margins for traditional and cloud. Hardware vendors, on the other hand, they're obviously seeing a lot less in revenue coming in so quickly. So they've been more of the holdups. And I might give plugs to Sophos since they are a sponsor here. That could be a little plug I could give around the topics that we talk about today. They do actually have, for edge security on the cloud, they are one of the most popular in the marketplace, at least for Amazon. So let's look at the focus, what we're going to talk about. So this is, if we look at NIST, which is the standards for, I think that's part of the name in NIST, is something about standards, but this is their standard for cloud, so what they define as cloud. You can see these essential services here, meaning on-demand self-service, meaning people can start spinning stuff up without actually applying security best practices like that. Resource pooling, things can rapidly start spanning up. And what that means for security is you've got to do your homework from day one. You've got to set in rules and regulations from day one to make sure that, yeah, if we're going to give on-demand access to other departments, other people, we've got to lock that down, but still in a nimble way that they can still perform, and they're not doing shadow IT and going out and circumventing the rules that you've put in place. So we'll be concentrating on public cloud and infrastructure as a service. The reason I focus on those two is because public cloud is probably the newest out there, and infrastructure as a service, out of the three types of services that you get on public cloud, from SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS, it's probably the most prone to problems. If you look at the other side, SaaS, a lot of it's looked after for you. There's still some gotchas, but it's more at the end user point where the problems would occur. Whereas on IaaS, there is a lot of misconceptions out there that they're going to look after it all for you, just like SaaS. So we'll go through those misconceptions, myths, and things that you can do to be aware of. So if anybody's, you may have seen this diagram before to explain what the differences are between the different cloud models. What we're going to concentrate on the second one from the left, infrastructure as a service. You can see there, if we just change that to technical terms, you can see what I was talking about before. What's in orange there is actually all the cloud provider looks after. So everything above from the OS level up, that's what your responsibility is. So this is what they call shared infrastructure, shared responsibility. So a lot of people go into this and for some reason they think, I don't need antivirus, I don't need edge perimeter security. And yeah, sure, on the SaaS side, where they're looking after everything except for the end user's laptop or device, that's the case. But here, with infrastructure as a service, you still have to look after your operating system patches, you still have to look after the security there, whether it be various different pieces. So we're going to concentrate on that. And we're going to concentrate on Amazon and Azure, because if we have a look here, this is just 2 Gartner Magic Quadrants from last year. Hasn't really changed in the last 5 years much, but you can see here, it's a bit blurry on the screen, but that's Amazon and Microsoft in those 2 leader bits for infrastructure as a service and for cloud storage. Down the bottom here in the niche players and visionaries, that keeps changing all the time. We keep seeing different providers drop out, new ones be added. For instance, Rackspace has given up and started to become a managed service provider instead of doing cloud. About the only one that's been consistent that hasn't dropped off the chart is Google. It's been hovering around that same spot for the last 5 years. And they seem to be taking business concerns serious in the last 12 months. So that's good to see, because obviously when you've only got 2 key players in the market, you're worried about one getting complacent. So it would be good to see at least 3 players in that leader area. Would make my life a lot harder though, being agnostic. That would be 3 I'd have to know across in depth. At the moment, Azure, AWS really in depth, but the other ones just enough to get me in trouble. So let's look at Azure. So what I'm going to do here is a zoom in perspective around security for Azure. So they have a lot of data centers. I think at last count it's somewhere in the 30s, 30 data centers across the globe. I think it's going to be 36, 38 by the end of this year. And what that is, the good thing about cloud is it's getting cookie cut. So traditionally when we had to have data centers that we used around the globe, whether it be for your website, for getting latency to end users quicker, a lot of the time we were dealing with different networks, different architecture. The great thing here is they all work pretty much exactly identical. And this case applies to Amazon as well. They have all these data centers. They're pretty much cookie cut, and you can template things. You can deploy something in India and use that same template, just change a few little bits in your code and deploy it with the same security parameters and firewalls and settings as you would in Australia or Canada. Now what that means is that you're making sure that things are standardized. You're making sure that you set it up correctly once, and we do all this by code. There are GUI interfaces where you could jump in and click around, but the best way to manage in the cloud is by code. And you can get these big JSON scripts with every piece in there, whether that's the network, what network ranges you've got there, ACL lines and things, and you can actually change just those pieces in the code. So it's a lot harder to mess up. You're not having somebody click on the wrong thing, or the page didn't load fast enough and they clicked and the button moved and they clicked on something else. So it's a lot more static and also a lot easier to audit. If somebody executes a script and suddenly you have an audit and you say, hey, we've got this firewall port open, it shouldn't be open, you can go back, have a look at the script and see where you made the mistake, edit that script and reapply it to all your environments. So therefore, like, yes, we are having a lot more problems across a lot more environments open, but you're also able to fix it a lot quicker. So if we look at a region, and what a region is we're looking at a maybe a cluster of data centers around a city. And you can see from the point where it enters the region, it really starts to become virtualized. So we've got software-defined networking at the WAN level. And then we start having a lot of options around security, software-defined security, the performance load balancers. And also the other thing is Microsoft and Amazon are protecting things as well, monitoring all these areas, monitoring your VMs. Now, I must say they are monitoring it more to protect themselves than they are to protect you. If you think about it, if you have a server running up there, you've got all ports open, and you're getting a denial of service attack, and you're not really looking after it, you're not trying to stop it or mitigate it, the other people that are using that same hardware are going to get affected. The network traffic is going to get laggy. So what they're going to do is they're going to suddenly cut off your access, send you an email saying, hey, we saw a crazy amount of traffic going on that didn't look solicited. We need you to fix this. And they've got these monitors, they'll lock it down, but that's not good for you. That's taking the reins out of your hands and then locking it down. So you don't really want to get to that situation. And the other thing is, if there's an virus, an injection code, your passwords are compromised, Amazon and Microsoft aren't aware of that. So if there's nothing, no anomalies happening in your traffic and things that they're watching for, they're not going to know that somebody's just backdoored your environment. So just to give you an idea what a physical data center looks for Microsoft Azure. I don't have any pictures of Amazon. I don't think there are any pictures out there. I've been told many times in the past, many years ago, it may have changed in the last 5 years, but they don't let people go through Amazon data centers, which actually I like the fact that people aren't just wandering around. I mean, a photo could probably tell me anyway. But Microsoft do tours. You can go through their data centers, and they're pretty boring like this. They order in and replace their servers by the shipping container. They don't take them out of the shipping container. They keep them in there. And I remember a few years ago actually talking to somebody from Amazon, and they were talking about the fact that they're not even going to, in the future, have walls and doors. If you think about it, where's the best place to hide if you're some super spy or something and trying to hack into their data center physically? You're going to hide in the bathrooms or the around corners, behind doors, access keys. But what if these shipping containers were out in the open? What if you had only 4 cameras having to monitor it all because that's the only space that somebody could hide in? So that's actually what they're looking at. And also Microsoft are actually experimenting with putting their data centers underwater as well. So meaning quite hard to physically get in touch with it. So these sort of new ways of thinking, I believe, like when other competitors to them are ordering in their data centers and working out, making sure that they have enough for expanded growth, they're ordering by the racks. They're not talking about shipping containers. So it just shows you the growth and size, but also, yeah, security-wise, you've got dedicated teams monitoring not only on the virtual level, but on the physical level as well. So I just wanted to point this out as well. Data sovereignty is something that I've talked about a lot in the past, over the last few years. I was always getting creative about security and compliance around keeping data within Canada and making sure that the data that could go anywhere would go anywhere, and we were doing data auditing and tagging data to make sure that it goes to the right places, the right encryption and security is applied. We don't have to worry about that so much anymore. So Microsoft and Amazon now have data centers in Quebec, and Microsoft have them in Toronto. Amazon's coming soon. So, but what that means is you've got, on both sides of the table, you've got at least 2 data centers in Canada. They can, you can set things up that data doesn't even leave. So when you're talking about data security and sovereignty, you can actually make sure that where it goes, and a lot of the tools that you'd want to track this stuff is all free and built in with both providers. So you can see who's accessing your data, you can see the paths where it's stored, and making sure that those things like encryption in transit and rest are there by default and nobody's turned them off. So let's get into a bit of detail. Just want to make sure how I'm going for time. Okay. So security around Azure. So Azure, Microsoft are known for Active Directory. So a lot of their pieces around Active Directory, but one thing that I've noticed in the last few years is they've really opened up to supporting a lot of different standards. I think the open source Linux world took them by surprise, and they've been playing a bit of catch up in recent years. One of the things you may have noticed if you've been watching the title of Microsoft Azure is it's called Microsoft Azure now, not Windows Azure as it was a few years ago. And that's because they're actually running more open source and Linux on Azure than they do actually Windows. And there's more Windows actually running on Amazon, funny enough. So a lot of different standards there, a lot of better pricing around security as well. They're trying to price things so that it's not so expensive anymore to have unlimited users accessing their Active Directory. And multi-factor authentication on both Azure and AWS is very simple to set up. You could set up access to your environment within probably 5 minutes to both, using apps on your phone to set up multi-factor authentication in conjunction with your password login. Securing your apps, lots of choices there. Using industry standards, you can put encryption at the data, files, the applications, the services, what's communicating there, the drives themselves. You can encrypt the VHD file, the file of the actual server when you upload it up there to the cloud. There's lots of different standards. You can even do encryption with BitLocker inside the OS itself. And access, so Microsoft, and this is the same with Amazon, they don't have access to your data. I think with Amazon, they can't ever get access. I would have to check that, but at least with Microsoft, they can for support cases, but it's only on demand, and as soon as they don't need access anymore, it's revoked. So just around the security features, again, a lot of options here. You can actually store your encryption keys in your own data center off Azure. Same with Amazon, you can store your encryption keys offsite, or you can use their service that looks after your encryption keys themselves. They have key managers up there, but even then, they don't have access. They can't decrypt those keys that are stored in there. So with the server infrastructure, you've got, well, with the network infrastructure really, we're looking at a lot of options here, and this is all stuff that's there. You don't have to actually specially request. You can jump on there right now. Once you've got an account set up in 15 minutes, you can start setting up these sort of things, except for this express route. Obviously, that's a dedicated internet line that you have from wherever you origin is. Maybe it's your data center, maybe it's your office, straight into their data center. So we have that option, or you can have a VPN. You can have multiple VPNs coming from multiple destinations into Azure, or many different Azure instances that you have. Lots of security and control lists, IP filtering. You can control the traffic. You can control the users. You can lock down things, read-only access. You can get quite granular about even the services that they want to use. And that's one thing that I talk to a lot of clients about, is putting in governance in place, setting who can access what, why would they want to, setting what size of servers so they don't spend a lot of money on your consumption-based billing. So security around spending is also a big issue as well. So there's a lot of different layers here, the hypervisor level, the security there, separation. One of the things we hear a lot about with the cloud is, oh, somebody else has got their data sitting on the same hard drive as mine. So they can obviously hack into my data. But what they're doing is there's virtual separation. So there's a lot of security around that, making sure tenants are isolated, making sure that people can't. And a lesser known fact is with the cloud now, you can actually get dedicated hardware. So if that is a concern to you of having people running on the same hardware as you've got your data, you can pay a bit more. I think it's about 20% extra, and you can get your own hardware to run on. So if that is a concern, that's there as well. So we've got security groups, we've got monitoring that's there by just happening in the background by Microsoft. Actually had some of my guys were down in Redmond just yesterday. They were doing a tour of one of the security operations centers that Microsoft has down there. And then physical security, it's all the stuff that you'd expect from a traditional data center, big perimeter fences, video cameras, but this is at an enterprise level. So if you're a small business, this is something that you would probably have paid a premium for, would have been cost prohibitive. You probably were just happy that they had some sort of access card swipe, a sticky mat as you walk through the data center, and they had a generator that they tested once every 6 months. That was probably the highest of your expectations. But what Microsoft and Amazon have got is like they're going straight to the enterprise level, and they're giving that to you at a granular cost that you can afford. But this is all by default. This is without you even having to specially request any of this. So that's where we get into shared responsibility, as I was talking about earlier. This is Microsoft's explanation of it, but basically it is saying from the operating system level up, you are responsible. You're responsible for the traffic that comes in, the traffic you invite. They do have soft rules in place a lot of the time, such as how much email traffic can come in and come out. They obviously don't want to have their DNS addresses and IP addresses blacklisted. So they're trying to prevent that from even happening in the first place. I'm sure many of you have had to remove IP and DNS addresses in the past from blacklists. It's not an easy process. So they've got soft rules in place. I was talking to a pen tester earlier about the fact that you can do denial of service attacks as a test, things like that, but you have to let them know. You have to say, this is the time period that I'll be running this test between. Just don't start locking down my environment, don't freak out, it's all okay. So they do have their soft limits. They do also have hard limits. They have things that you can't do. Obviously, they don't want to be exposing their infrastructure and other layers. So let's talk about Amazon. So here's just a quick idea of, so Amazon and Microsoft only just recently last year opened up their data centers in Canada. Here's just a few names, you probably see a lot of them. We've got Lululemon just down the road, Shaw running on there. We've got BC Hydro, Adobe, BlackBerry, a lot of well-known Canadian companies there already using Amazon, and probably just as many using Microsoft. And I would probably argue there's probably a lot that before we even had Canadian data centers, big names that were using Microsoft from the SaaS side of things, Office 365 and a lot of their other SaaS tools. Here's all the compliances, frameworks, and certifications that Amazon has by default. Now what this means is that traditionally you would have to request the data center to be compliant. They would probably have PCI and HIPAA, but nothing much more, unless they were specialized in other sorts of industries. But this is all there by default. So the great thing about this is even if you don't need HIPAA, PCI, or any of the government standards, you know that they're getting independently audited all the time by these different frameworks and security compliances, law enforcement, and that to make sure that they're compliant at a very high level. And that's layered on top of each other. So that's not just, oh, if I have a server running in this area, is it going to be HIPAA compliant? I have to put it into the right area. No, that's, you can put your server anywhere in Amazon, anywhere in Microsoft Azure, and it'll meet those compliances. But we go back to shared responsibility. It's only the layers that they look after that meet that compliance. So you still have to make sure that your compliance is being met from the operating system level up. And again, that's something that people forget about as well. And also, it's not as straightforward. Most organizations, I know health, I'm working with health a lot, they base their own compliance agreements on HIPAA, but they'll add a lot more to it because there's a lot of other organizations that are integrating with their information. So we've got to make sure, and I'm working with clients all the time to talk to Amazon and Microsoft to make sure that we do custom agreements, make sure that we're meeting those things. So that's all possible as well. So it's not rigid. It's not, here is the compliance. They're not going to help you from beyond those cookie cut pieces. They will actually do custom agreements with you to whatever you need. I haven't seen one yet turned back, but obviously legal, they go redlining each other's work all the time. It's always a fun process to see. It's funny, we want to deploy something, it'll take us an hour to deploy it, but it'll take about 3 months for legal to work out the compliance and regulations. So, maturity, let's talk about Amazon maturity. 10 years old, so that's pretty old in the IT world for something to be around. I mean, just look at if you guys have been introduced to containers, Docker. Only 2 years ago it was something new, and now it's starting to become mainstream. So 10 years is like a lifetime. I don't think we've had anything that old since Windows XP. So yeah, and Amazon were running data centers before that. The whole reason they got into cloud was because they said, look, we've got these worldwide data centers that we're running. We've got a lot of free capacity. Let's lease it out. So they were doing this a long time before that 10 years started. And it's actually looking like they're going to start making more money from their cloud business than they will their actual online retail. I know Google has projected that they're only making like 10% of what Amazon does per year in revenue at the moment, but they're projecting by 2020 they'll be making more than any other piece of Google, just from their Google Cloud piece. So again, just wanted to make sure I didn't forget that Amazon also has presence in Canada now as well. So the myths. So about the myths. So hear these all the time. People can hack me because my physical drive, we'll talk about that just before. Sort of debunked that already. And even if you are worried about people running on your physical drive, you can get your own. My cloud is open to the public. So I think the word public in public cloud kind of misleads people. It makes them think that this is wide open. It's only really for websites. You can actually lock down your environment that it's not actually open to the internet at all. You could, if you want to, have a dedicated line straight into Amazon or Azure, have it all closed off to the internet, and just, you could not even have your office open up to the internet if that was what you wanted. So the word public is a bit misleading. I actually had a client about 8 years ago say, shouldn't use the word public, it scares everybody. I'm like, I don't invent these words. So yeah, we've touched on the multi-tenancy thing. You can have dedicated, public, yep, we touched on public. Can't meet compliance standards. We already talked about that, how you can customize the compliance standards, and they are there by default. Encryption access. So we talked about that earlier. They can't actually get access to your keys. You can keep your keys. They never even have them saved on their servers if you want. When you generate a key, it gives you an option. Do you want to download this directly, or do you want to save it in their vault? So you have that straight away, and you can lock them out totally. Obviously, the risk with that, there's no back door. You lose that key, you lose your data. But at least you have that choice. And even if you did, if you accidentally delete it from the key management area, it's lost as well. So there is no circumstance where you can say, hey, Amazon, can you look after my keys for me? And if I lose them, can I get them back? Or can I do a password reset on this key so I can get it back? There's not even an option to do that. Cloud is less secure than in-house. It's debatable. My preference, like I said, is I'm biased towards cloud. My theory is they've got a crackpot team working 24/7, security experts, some of the best in the world, watching over these data centers. It's far more than even most enterprise clients could have. So, and they're cookie cutting it all. They're keeping people within boundaries. They're not just saying, hey, you can do whatever you like, which obviously opens up a lot more things to watch. If you can't touch it, you don't own it. So I think that's becoming debatable these days. I used to talk to government officials that we used to talk about this, and I used to point out, well, do you go over the border with your BlackBerry? Are you using unencrypted email over AT&T network? Suddenly, you're not touching the things that are in the air. So you're actually breaking your own rules and regulations by actually ever using anything physically outside of Canada, because AT&T and them, they're buffering all your information that you're doing over the air. So maybe it's encrypted today, they can hold on to it and then break it in 5 years' time. But I think there was a good story the other week where a NASA official was actually coming back into the States, and there was all these Trump rules in place. And they took a copy of all his drives and everything. He refused at first. He's like, I'm a government official. I can't actually open up this for you. He reneged in the end because there's no oversight over a lot of government authorities such as customs. So that was an interesting case where, like, what do they even want with that information? So I guess customs will be flying rockets over all these walls that we're going to build between Mexico and Canada soon. And then, yeah, cloud is offline. Obviously, you do have the problem of if it is offline, or your internet is down, you don't have access. But I think in the world that most are living in today, there's a mobile workforce. And if your office is internet down, most people can go home and work from there. A lot of things are web-based now, and especially once you start going to the cloud, you start putting these security and applications in there to be more mobile in the first place. So it sort of does start to make you think outside the box as well. So is the cloud more secure? So this is a very biased comparison here, but I was trying really hard to find more examples of public cloud companies getting hacked. The CodeSpace one, I think, was 2014, and One More Cloud was the same. I think the reason why, if I'm going to talk in balance of why we've got so many on the right-hand side, is because it really comes down to that if you were Googling or looking for articles about has Azure or AWS screwed up in security, it hasn't been them that screwed up. It's been the company that was running on their infrastructure. They've been hacked through their front ends that they were running. Whether that be British Columbia, they left a hard drive on a desk and when they were transporting it between data centers, and then it went missing. We all know about the US problems that they've been having with different hackers and conspiracies. We know about Sony, it was mentioned earlier, and I'm sure it's been mentioned a lot during the last 2 days about their hack there. I was the first to say that wasn't North Korea. I guess we'll never know who. Target, that was a third party integrating into their environment, and that's where the breach happened. Yahoo and LinkedIn, even another photo company that Yahoo, there was a lot of website-based companies that got hacked last year with lots of email and user addresses being leaked. But again, all those stories were not about their infrastructure being hacked. It was all about their front end or vulnerabilities that they had and what they built on top of. But also a lot of these guys are not building on Microsoft. Well, actually, all these ones that I've listed here weren't built on Microsoft Azure or AWS. Although Sony, I believe, is putting things in AWS now. So what does the future look like? Definitely believe the health sector is going to start getting attacked more. Death of the password. We've had so many leaks now of passwords. I think people not changing passwords. I think companies are going to have to take responsibility more for enforcing multi-factor authentication. I'm still on the fence about Twitter and Facebook and them asking for my phone number and wanting to send me a text message, and then all of a sudden they've got yet another little piece of information about me. But do need to do something. Be great if they had an app that let me do multi-factor authentication across everything instead of forcing me on what multi-factor authentication they're going to put in place. And yeah, ransomware. Ransomware has been a big one. There's been governments in Canada getting hit by this all over the place. And that's only going to increase anywhere that they're profiting. And they are profiting. They're making good money out of this. It's just not worth the time, the numbers that they ask in their ransom. It's not worth the time to actually mess about and try to fix the encryption. I mean, if you've got good backup and you've got good security in place, prevention is the only real cure to it. But like viruses back in the day, they're evolving every day. And then I think I heard somebody on stage mention this earlier, so there might have been an announcement yesterday about this, but I know that Canada has been considering a data breach bill, and it's something that's getting implemented in the EU this year, meaning about announcing things. I think it's within 90 days of there being a data breach, you need to be announcing that publicly, otherwise you're going to face some tough sanctions. So that really shows that like documenting and having a plan in place for when those things happen is pretty critical. So yeah, so how can we overcome this? How can we prevent it? Planning, as I was talking about, whether that's planning with templates, blueprints, putting some governance in place to make sure you know who has access to what they're allowed to, doing it by scripting, templates and code instead of GUI interfaces, and also having documentation about your processes, whether that be when we do a DR, we don't want to be running around with our heads on fire and just do whatever works. We want to make sure the security is still in place when the DR goes into effect. When we have a breach, do we have documentation on how we release that to the public? So education, making sure that everybody's up to speed, everybody is confident about what you're doing. Accountability, that's all about the governance, making sure we're documenting and making people accountable for what is actually going on, and in a certain situation, who to turn to. Audit logs and tracking ties back to accountability as well, being able to have those things in place, make sure it doesn't get lost, and make sure those things are turned on and that everybody's agreeing to it, and that you have minimum standard thresholds in place. So shared responsibility, just pointing out edge security, I was talking about earlier, Sophos having one of the most popular UTM devices on Amazon. They also have an XG device for firewall, and they're coming out with a UTM very shortly, just like Amazon's one on Azure. Internal security, making sure that you have malware and other protections in this, but especially if you're running VDI in the cloud, it's become quite cost effective to have virtual desktops and applications running in the cloud. And then their patch and your typical data security. Network design, making sure you have a DMZ, demilitarized zone, you're having private and public subnets, making sure that those things are separated. I mean, Amazon and Microsoft isolating things from the hardware level, but you've got to also do that from the virtual network level as well. And resource tagging is an interesting one as well. You can actually tag resources within your cloud environment. So this can be interesting for alerts, chargeback for billing, things like that. And lastly, just a bit of a plug for ourselves, just working with a partner. We've got lots of experience, managed services and support, having somebody to call on at any time, not just taking a guess or feeling like, hey, does everybody in this room who's never done this before agree with what I'm about to do? Have a partner that you work with who has that experience across your industry and your templates and things that you're putting out there. Make sure they have mentorship. You don't want to just be calling up when something breaks. You want to be able to call them to actually say, hey, I've just written this script to deploy my 100 servers out there. Can you have a look? See if I've made a mistake. See if I've accidentally put 3 extra zeros in front to delete something so you don't have a outage like what happened with Amazon the other week. Assessments. So partners can also help you with assessments. Maybe that's a once-a-year audit to make sure that you guys are still following everything you talk about, or whether management just thinks that you're practicing that, but in practice it's not actually happening. And then, yeah, like hybrid cloud. There's a lot to know differences between your traditional private cloud and the public cloud. How do those work together? Find a partner that has experience on both. You don't want somebody who just knows data center and is biased towards that. You don't want somebody who just knows cloud and is going to stuff everything in that box for you. You want somebody who, even if you do go 100% cloud, you know that you sized it up, you made sure that the traditional data center was not the right choice. And make sure they're certified. There's lots of people out there saying that they're managed service providers, but are they certified? Are they certified? Are they winning awards from companies like MSP Mentor? Are they certified by the cloud provider themselves? I know that we get independently audited by Amazon every year, and we're the only Canadian company that has been certified as an MSP with Amazon, for example. So just lastly, to wrap up, I just wanted to thank Alex for the beers and for putting on this. I think it's been a very valuable event for everybody, if I speak. I don't know where Alex is, but I just wanted to give him a clap since we're wrapping up the day. And we've one last great speaker to come up here about health industry. But yeah, I just wanted to thank them. And just lastly, myself, I run a local community group here in Vancouver and Seattle. We run it every month. It's free. Come have free beers and food and network. And we always have 2 great speakers on to talk about cloud in general. If anybody's interested in speaking, volunteering, helping, being engaged in any way other than just attending and learning and networking with others, let me know. There's the next event, or you can always go to the website to see when the next event for next month is on as well. Thank you everybody for your time. If there's any questions, I could take a quick few if there's still time. I don't know how I'm going exactly to time.
I have a question. I'm wondering what is your general impression on the security posture and security controls between Azure and AWS? Is one stronger in some areas than the other?
When you're talking about Azure and AWS, I think they're pretty equal. When I get into pricing, it gets a bit more interesting. Every day it changes, but security, they're pretty much on par. The only difference I see is that Microsoft let you actually see their data center. Amazon doesn't, but it really depends whether you're a doubting Thomas or not, whether you just trust that Amazon's doing everything right. But I mean, the fact that they have all those independent compliance audits happening gives me the trust that somebody from an authority is actually keeping you on par. And when it comes to compliance as well, they're pretty much neck and neck. Like each one comes out with a different ISO standard or something every few months, and then the other one hits back with something else, sort of thing. So they're pretty much, they've got all the core stuff covered, is my feeling, and they're pretty on par. When you start talking about other providers like Google and IBM and that, then that would be a different story. I have not done a comparison, but I imagine that they're not up to the same sort of par, is my guess.
I've got a question about the route sovereignty requirement. I understand recently Microsoft and other providers have to have a route through the Canada to their VPN sites like Microsoft Express route and any other VPN. It has to be going through Canadian ISPs versus making a little turn to US and come back to Canada. Can you shed some light on that?
I haven't, I know that last year when I was checking up on that, yeah, it was true that they didn't have direct connect and express route. It is coming. It will be coming. The question is really about that direct line that I was talking about from your office or data center to their Canadian data center. Is that here yet? I have not checked up recently, but I know that obviously they focus on the data center first, getting that all up to parity with the other data centers they have around the world so that you can expect the same services across things. And that backbone network is obviously something that, yeah, would be something that would be one of the last things, but obviously an important thing as well. Like, obviously they have a lot more advanced features that are going to come after that, and I think that that would be next on their radar. If not, I haven't kept up in the last few months whether one or the other has released anything yet, but I do know I was talking to a partner of ours just a couple of months ago that we were waiting for that, so it's definitely coming. I just don't know when.
Hi there.
Well,
Hi. I was wondering about the serverless stuff. So there's Azure functions and AWS Lambda. If you've looked at those, if there's any surprises, they seem like they're pretty solid in terms of security.
it's interesting that you say that. Last night I stumbled upon an article about security with serverless architecture. I didn't read it yet. But I mean, again, that's starting. Serverless architecture is really where you're doing everything by code. You're not actually having a Windows server running. Again, there would be a certain point where it's your responsibility. So it's probably like, if we were to look at those models of infrastructure, like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and SaaS, that serverless architecture, although not technically correct, would probably sit at that PaaS level where they've taken the server operating system and all that away from you, but you've still got to look after, is your code doing things correctly? Have you set up the right security groups, ACL lists, and all those sort of permissions and security access? So the networking piece still operates the same. That's wrapped around your serverless code. Probably doesn't answer it. I'm going to read that article tonight when I get home.
Hey, Matt. I'm wondering, when you guys have customers that come to you and say, we want to move to the cloud, whether incrementally or lift and shift, what is it that differentiates your recommendations regarding one provider over another?
Why would I pick one cloud provider over another?
Exactly.
It's a hard one. It's definitely something, being agnostic, I'm doing it every day. Reevaluating which way I tend to direct people. It really depends on what they're doing. We really focus on the applications. A lot of clients look at me weird. They say, here's the CPU, here's the memory, here's the disk space, and I go, well, let's not even go there yet. Let's talk about the applications. What are you running? What sort of access do the applications need? Now let's look at, like, just off the top of my head, I'll be like, okay, so that is much more expensive to run in Azure because they just don't have that as a service yet. Or maybe it's more expensive to run in Amazon because they don't fully support it, or you've got some licensing agreement with Microsoft to bring it over. A lot of the time it's cost and how close to the ecosystems that those two favor. Microsoft obviously favoring their Microsoft ecosystem, although they are friendly to open source. I mean, SQL databases can now run on Linux, so hell has frozen over now. But yeah, Amazon has a lot more choice and options around open source. So a lot of times you can get more granular on costing and things with Amazon on that way. So it normally comes down to a cost thing and compatibility for what you're doing, but both work very well. And if you're just running virtual machines, it normally becomes an exact cost comparison, feature comparison. They can both pretty much do the same things. It's just one is slightly better at open source, in my opinion. One is slightly better at Microsoft ecosystem.
You've talked a couple of times about private connections to cloud providers. I just want to share with the group that a company called Council is launching in Vancouver shortly, and they have dedicated connections to 170 data centers worldwide. And if you can get to them at the Harbor Center, actually they'll be co-located with Cologix. It's about $400 for a E100 into any of those data centers in North America. And you can buy the 100 meg and you can actually split 50 meg to Oregon and 50 meg to Montreal, or any combination of those data centers. And the traffic goes up to 10 gigs if you want, if you're playing in that area.
So, sorry, just to clarify, you're saying that they're doing Amazon and Microsoft in Canada?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So
Right.
they must have opened it up then. Yep. So what was the name of the company?
Console. C-O-N-S-O-L-E.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I will look them up afterwards, and probably a few others who will as well. Thank you for sharing that. If that is everybody, thank you for your time. And yeah, if anybody has any questions afterwards, feel free to come and find me.